Hey everybody. So as I'm working on the Lockheed Air Express and going through some reference material, came across a pretty good book called Revolution in the Sky, and this is pretty much all about this aircraft and the 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 different iterations and variants of it. So here's a Vega on floats. It's probably one of the first 3 or 4 aircraft that they built. And you know, the people that were involved with Lockheed were Jack Northrop, among others. And what they did was, and the reason why this airplane was so smooth, and I got the timeline kind of wrong. In an earlier video I think I talked about this being a 30s airplane. It's actually a mid-20s design, and it was way ahead of the curve there. It had the cantilevered wing, which didn't require any wire bracing at all, any external bracing, and you can kind of clearly see that in this image. There's just nothing outside of the aircraft supporting the wing, which was a brand new and novel concept. Also, I think it was Northrop who came up with the method of building the fuselage using monocoque plywood, and what he did was he built concrete formers that they would lay these huge plywood sheets into that were shaped, the concrete formers were shaped like sections of the fuselage. So they'd soak the plywood and lay it into that former and then screw it together, the top and bottom piece, that created the curved section of plywood. So it was kind of externally braced using that method. It was Anthony Fokker's method from World War I. That's how he was making Fokker designs at that time, and so when he came over to the U.S., Lockheed basically borrowed that method and improved on it by coming up. They improved on it by coming up with the concrete formers. Anyway, you know, the first aircraft was used for the Dole San Francisco to Hawaii. Dole sponsored the race, and I think it was Hearst that bought the first airplane to be used, and it was lost, but that didn't stop the aircraft from becoming successful in just the following year or two with a trans-polar flight. Anyway, working on this airplane, I'm now thinking about building one with floats. Not this one. This is going to be the Gilmore plane, but I can see I might be buying a few more of these kits. I want to look into this. I like that look on the floats. That kind of a thing about float planes. I guess if you've looked at the channel. This is an early iteration of the Air Express, and actually I thought the Air Express was the first variant, that they did the parasol wing before they did the cabin, before they did the cockpit in the front, but actually that's not the case. The parasol came after, and the idea, I think, was to increase airspeed by getting the wing off of the fuselage and then being able to do away with that added fairing and some of the airflow problems you would have around the fuselage under the wing along that area. Here you've got a cleaner airflow under the wing with the cockpit and windscreen further aft. They're not interrupting airflow like they would be up here. They're actually behind all of the turbulence or whatever effect that the wind would have is being removed from this section where the windscreen would cause more resistance. Back here it would be far less resistant. The air would already be broken up, and so the airflow would have less drag having this back here. Also, this aircraft, Roscoe Turner bought the first one that was powered with the Hornet engine. Pratt & Whitney made the Wasp, and then they upped the horsepower a little bit with an engine they called the Hornet. And originally the airplane was painted black, and Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company bought it. And it was Turner that bought it from them. He wanted an airplane, and I'm not sure whether they didn't have one off of the line yet, or that he had become familiar with the Hornet. They called it the Black Hornet for the way it was painted. Out in the field somewhere, he came across the airplane and decided he really wanted to own it. So he went to Gilmore Oil with a proposition that they buy the airplane for him. This is how Roscoe Turner was effective. One of the ways he was effective. So, and also, when talking about Roscoe Turner and his uniforms, I don't know if you can see this image. Here he is in the uniform holding Gilmore. I had thought there had been more than one lion, but Gilmore was the one and only. That's what they named the lion, obviously, because of the oil company owner. But he got Gilmore, Earl Gilmore, to buy the airplane, put all their logos on it, and then Roscoe went out and got the lion, and then they would fly around and do promotional things with it. But this was the Hornet powered airplane. Now I'm putting a Wasp engine into it. There's not, I don't think, any more difference between the two than other than displacement. But it's funny how the book talks about the fuselage shape here being more or less an egg shape. I don't know if I got the camera in the right angle to see that. But the cowling, it goes from that egg shape to being round at the front end. And again, this all gets it gets this finished fascia. This will go onto the cowling after I get it all infilled and so forth. Anyway, all this mounts on the front of the aircraft with the engine inside. And again, the way I'm doing this is like the photograph that I put up, where I'm not going to have the cowling on the airplane. We're going to have the engine exposed out here. But I'm thinking that I was thinking I would try to hog out and hollow out the cowling once it's all prepped for paint, or just before it's prepped for paint, and see if I can't get it to fit over this nose, over this engine, and bolt and be fitted on here, so that I wouldn't necessarily have to glue it on, but it would fit over the engine. I could just make the propeller removable if I wanted to have the cowling on it for a few photographs and then take it off and then affix the propeller permanently. I'm not sure. Again, I do a lot of spitballing. What you guys know, when I do these videos, I talk a lot about what I might do here and I might do there, and then the project goes the way it goes. Also, I thought about opening up the fuselage and cutting out these windows and cutting the door, and actually cutting off the top here so that I could go in and put seats and finish it and flesh it out. But I'm thinking now I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to finish it as smoothly as I can, get it to look like this, and then use the provided decals. And I noticed that on this aircraft, the Hornet powered aircraft only had 3 windows, the door in the center and a window on either side. So that's how I'll be doing this. I'll be cutting this free. This spare window will come off, and I'll be using these decals to replicate the door and windows. Here are the wheel pants. I've got one of the little side inside fairings done. It goes roughly like this. Here it'll be sanded a little bit smaller, more rounder, and tapered more towards the back end. It won't be consistently thick like this. It'll taper across here and to a point, and then be attached. And I'll make 2 of these, one for each, obviously one for each of the wheel pants, and we'll get those on there. but I think we've got the right size. If we look at the photograph and then look at the model with this kind of next to it here, it looks like it's about right. At least it looks good enough to me. So, you know, work progresses. I've got the fuselage now about 50% of the infill done, a little bit less than 50%. Let's call it 40%. I've shaped the nose. We had that rough block on there. Now it's pretty well sanded to shape. There'll be more sanding to be done. This is just rough. I just wanted to get it to the profile, and so there'll be more work to be done on that. Let's see, by appearances here, it looks like the engine's all black. And however, in the one photograph that I saw, it looked like the hub, this center section hub, was left gray or light gray. I'm thinking what I'll probably do is mask it down to about here and leave the nose gray with the remainder black. It looks more like the photograph, the other photograph I have, the one I'm using as my target for the model. And also, they changed the lion head design for some reason. On the earlier initial Gilmore aircraft, it had this rounder lion head, and then they changed that to a more aggressive, sort of a narrower look. On the aircraft that I've posted on the various forums that I did, and I think even on my channel, the picture I'm working off of, that picture has the later lion head on it. But the decals that I got from Cowling are this. They have this lion head, which is fine. When I communicated with her, I said I wanted to look like the photograph that I sent her, but they ended up doing this one, and that's okay. That's all right. It's still accurate. This is the panel from Lindbergh's airplane. Lindbergh bought this aircraft in the low wing configuration, so they took basically the same fuselage and tail empennage, all this, and you had either a parasol wing, a forward cockpit, fuselage mounted upper top wing, or you had this low wing version, and they put the low wing on floats or wheels for you. So that's this is what they called the Sirius. So you had Vega, Air Express, and then Sirius, the Hornet, which was just this airplane with the bigger engine on it, the Hornet engine, Pratt & Whitney's Hornet instead of the Wasp, and on and on. They mounted them on skis, they mounted them on floats. Lindbergh and his wife decided they wanted a closed cockpit. They wanted to have a canopy. So that's what this is. So there's that iteration. And what else? Well, I mean, as you can see, so the airplane was really significant. And again, this came about in the mid-20s, way ahead of its time. So this airplane was winning air races, both cross-country, closed course. The saying was it took a Lockheed to beat a Lockheed. So the first 4 airplanes that were built, the pilots that had them set about right away to breaking transcontinental records. They just started flying them as fast as they could from coast to coast to set records and get their names into the books for firsts in both east to west and west to east. In one case, they had a mechanic opening 5-gallon gas cans. He threw 30 or 40 5-gallon cans of gas into the cabin, and during the flight, he would pump the gas into the upper wing. In one case, the poor guy asphyxiated himself. He passed out and he almost lost the airplane for running out of gas. They were able to revive him, and he was able to resume pumping gas, but I think at the finish of the race, he was saying, I don't care if they pay me $1 million, I'll never do that again. So apparently they didn't think about ventilation or gas fumes or any of that stuff. Typical of the day. People with not much forethought into things, they would just jump in and go, and that's kind of what was happening there. Earlier versions had this more swept tail, They didn't put the rounded tail on there until after they built the first aircraft. This is the panel I'll try to replicate for this airplane. It's the Sirius panel, but I'm relatively certain that the center section at least would not have been changed. Everything in here was done according to Lindbergh. So that, you know, I don't need to copy all of that, but the center portion of the panel I'll be pretty much mimicking that for our aircraft. So this is a really good reference book. As you can see, I mean, it's all about this airplane. It's all about the power plants that went into it, the pilots who flew it, the people who worked on them and built them, the records they set. This was a very significant airplane, and much more than I had realized when I started out. Just a beautiful airplane. So anyway, just thought I'd follow up with another video, kind of a progress report and maybe a little bit of a backstory. Gilmore got big. He got to be too big for the airplane at one point. I mean, he was fully grown, and it would screw up the center of gravity when he was on the airplane and not in a cage. Roscoe Turner loved that animal and wouldn't put it in a cage. He wouldn't put Gilmore in a cage. He just let him roam around in the cabin there, and I guess it got to be problematic. Eventually they stopped flying with the Lion, but then he didn't like, you know, the other arrangements either, you know, keeping the Lion away and not having it. But it was just so big and intimidating for, you know, for spectators, and when you're trying to run a promotion and get people to come out and see you, and then you've got this Lion, no matter how tame he was, it just wasn't working out once Gilmore got to be full grown. Anyway, lots of stuff, and I keep saying anyway now, so I'm going to turn this off. I just thought a little bit of a backstory, and if anybody is interested in the airplane, this is the book. I got it, you know, just go to the library or whatever. Revolution in the Sky, The Fabulous Lockheeds, and it's by Richard Sanders Allen. Yeah, it's a pretty old book, but it's really good. I recommend if you like aviation.